Welcome to the Vision by Protiviti interview. I'm Joe Kornick, Director of Brand Publishing and Editor-in-Chief of Vision by Protiviti, our global content initiative looking into the future to examine big themes that will impact the C-suite and executive boardrooms worldwide. Today, we're exploring the future of ESG and its strategic implications for people, process, and the planet. I'm thrilled to welcome in Alex Robart, the GM of Sustainability and Industry Solutions at Microsoft, where he leads the firm's commercial sustainability solution strategy across industries. Alex will be asked about all that and more by Protiviti's David Petrucci, Managing Director and leader of the Supply Chain and Operations practice. So I'm happy to turn it over to David to begin.
Thanks, Joe. Alex, welcome and thank you for joining us today on such an important topic.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We know Microsoft has been leading the way when it comes to sustainability, not just internally, but also through your ecosystem. Satya has made some very bold pledges along the way. 100% renewable energy by 2025, protect more land than it uses by 2025, carbon negative by 2030, zero waste by 2030, water positive by 2030. These are all, extremely strong, stretch pledges for companies today. And then more important than anything is the carbon negative since foundation by 2050. And that's probably one of the most bold pledges of, any company around the world. These are some serious pledges, from a corporate citizen standpoint. Alex, could you talk about some of the challenges that Microsoft's looking at internally? You're doubling your data centers, every 14 to 18 months, but still achieving Satya's targets. How are you doing this?
Yeah. No, I'll just start by saying it does feel really good to work with a company who has been so bold and perhaps has set some of the most ambitious and holistic set of goals out there. So it's exciting. It makes you feel happy to come to work every day and really be a part of the solution. But I think from a cultural perspective and what allows us to have even made those goals, let alone execute on those goals, it really does come down to leadership to start. Full credit to Satya and to Brad Smith and to Lucas Joppa, our Chief Environmental Officer, who have, I think, been real thought leaders in constructing the goals and finding the fortitude and commitment that we, Microsoft, as one of the leading companies globally, with strong balance sheet, great performance, growth, all the things that you'd like to see, we have the ability to do more quickly than most companies, and in many cases more quickly than most other companies with our 2030 net negative goal or carbon negative goal. And so we do believe that we should do that. And so those are some of the big kind of philosophical thinking behind those goals. But in terms of, what does it look like internally to actually make the progress to execute against those things? Because the good and the bad of net zero targets is so many of them are 2050 with a timeline perspective, which is pretty far off for, you and I probably won't be working with companies still at 2050. And so in a way, it's not really your problem to set a 2050 target. But ours, our 2025 interim target around running our operations exclusively on renewable energy and our series of 2030 targets that you laid out there. They're very near-term targets where current leadership team and current company and people in place has to own it, execute, and deliver these things. And we're really on the hook. We set that first goal of ours, a carbon goal, in 2009. So it's been a pretty lengthy journey here since 2009, over a dozen years of work. And we've continued to deliver, and then reflect, upgrade, and set new goals for ourselves. Sometimes it feels like we can't stop setting more ambitious targets for ourselves. But I think we really started from an operational only focus. We really looked at, how do we make our offices and our data centers more efficient, more sustainable, with work that spans the company now to really evolve with a broad holistic focus, all of our products, all of our services, all of our customers, partners, policy, and of course, all our employees. And so it's been an evolution to get to, I think, that really holistic end-to-end point that not only looks within our four walls of the enterprise as Microsoft, but really considers broadly us as a global participant who can and should have more impact beyond just our own emissions footprint. So I think that was probably a really big, in a way, revelation for the fact that we can have a broader impact on our ecosystem as well as on the world globally. I think recent compulsory climate disclosure, the SEC's recently proposed rules, the UK, Europe, Japan, elsewhere, all of these are really crucial to putting our various countries on track to get to net zero and to a net zero future. And we've really decided to lean in as heavily as we can from a policy perspective, use that footprint, use that, I think, that maturity when it comes to engaging with policymakers and governments to provide them increasingly pertinent information to investors and to other companies, help facilitate the emergence of a framework for measuring climate-related impacts, and really to share meaningful insights to help our companies and our customers develop emissions reduction strategies. So following on from that policy framework, we really did move our focus beyond sort of getting a house in order with our footprint and then helping create new industries and lean in from a policy and an investment perspective to now shifting gears to ramping up a new effort, which is how do we empower our customers to deliver on sustainability and accelerate their own journeys. And so to that end, we're proud to announce last week that we did go general availability, full commercial launch of our new Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability product, which deliver a lot of the key capabilities from a platform and an application perspective to help our customers accelerate their sustainability journeys and ensure that they're in compliance with those rules coming country to country.
And Alex, you had so many good nuggets there. Let me dig into a couple things. You talked about leadership around sustainability and a bit of the culture at Microsoft. And you were talking about some of the tops down influence there, but could you talk maybe a little bit about the bottoms up position from a Microsoft culture standpoint and really what drives that progressive position in execution and what makes culture so special at Microsoft?
Well, I think, again, not to belabor leadership, but I think Satya has really pushed the concept of empathy and this growth mindset at the company. And since we started setting those sustainability goals back in 2009 and iterated on them and upgraded them, I think it's really become pretty well ingrained at this point in the company that all teams have some level of ownership over this. And we encourage them to take on stretch projects to help drive sustainability into whatever the mandate of their team might be, whether that's products for our customers or whether it's internal operations. So I think at this point, it's really a pretty thriving internal community of folks who lean in beyond whatever their day-to-day roles might be. And it's become an important part of lots of folks' jobs. And we do have a carbon fee that we implemented in 2012, I believe, was the first year we implemented the carbon fee. And we've steadily, I think, learned from that, iterated on it, and improved how it works so that each of the business groups across Microsoft have some accountability for their share of our footprint and have some level of ownership and ultimately, driving into executive remuneration to ensure that they're incentivized to make sure that we deliver on those goals. And so I think all these different things work together. But again, I think leadership with people and the empathy and the growth mindset, embracing some of these concepts is at the core. And so, just pleased to see that we've sort of gotten the entire organization engaged on such an important topic.
And Microsoft makes it sound so easy, but we know it's not. There were a lot of comments coming out of COP26 this year that we're all not doing enough, that these great targets and pledges that we're making still aren't being realized. And, I think everyone's seeing and learning that this is tough. This is not easy to make this change. It takes time. It takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of investment. Talk to us a little bit about what you think needs to change to drive the realization of this change.
I'll just emphasize your point earlier. These things are not easy. And I often, when I visit with customers, have to explain to them, yes, we've got these wonderful holistic goals, but our road has not been straight up and to the right. There's been plenty of bumps along the way, plenty of lessons learned and best practices that we've had to arrive at through some bumps along the road. And I think most recently, our recent sustainability report we published in early March, the headline figures in that sustainability report and those outcomes, great Scope 1 and Scope 2 outcomes, 17% reduction in Scope 1 and Scope 2 footprint, above plan. But on our Scope 3, we had a miss. We actually had a 23% increase in our Scope 3 footprint, a lot of which was unexpected, when we set those goals a couple of years ago. And so we really view this as sort of a learning year for, we've got a pretty good handle on our Scope 1 and Scope 2, and we're executing really well on the data center, renewables energy goals, which is really at the core of a lot of those energy and carbon goals. But there are things that are outside of our four walls, products in the hands of our customers, for instance. Our gaming demand was up. Gaming usage was up, which meant that a lot of these gaming systems, particularly older systems, are running on less decarbonized grids all around the world, which make it really tough for us to control the energy consumption and the carbon footprint associated. So we had a number of lessons learned between that, and particularly on the point that you raised about this big data center build out. We haven't figured out ways yet, tomorrow and today, to really zero out the carbon footprint associated with those construction activities and some of that capital equipment that goes into those data centers. We're working on it for sure, but don't have the perfect near-term solution in front of us today. And so lots of lessons learned. So I do always try to convey to our customers that this is hard, we're learning, and we're here to bring those learnings to you and help you accelerate and bring those best practices to bear.
And I think you brought up some good points around scope 3, where it becomes much more challenging when you're looking at that full value chain and you're trying to move from maybe more of a standards-based accounting model to how do I get the real data? How do I get the real view of what's going on across that whole value chain model? We know the sustainability cloud has been, GA'd, but are there other things that Microsoft's looking at that will kind of help the collaboration, visibility, and the continuity of information exchange across that broad spectrum?
Yeah, it's a great question. When we sat down and first started thinking about the product strategy for what became the Cloud for Sustainability, we really started with the framing that this is a value chain problem. We really have to think more broadly about the problem. How do you solve, not just for each individual company, those Scope 1 and Scope 2, but how do we solve for value chains? And what's required to facilitate that flow of data through the value chain so that each value chain has the most effective understanding of their value chain footprint, not just immediately upstream and downstream, but all the way through that chain for any individual participant in that chain. Is that thought process has really anchored our strategic thinking here, along with the product that's Cloud for Sustainability, with the application called Microsoft Sustainability Manager, designed to help companies with their sustainability data accounting and reporting and that workflow. We also are viewing this platform that is Cloud for Sustainability in the application as a tool to help facilitate that flow of data and ensure that we've got high quality, high integrity data that we can eventually help companies move back and forth, recognizing that we really need a holistic solution if we're going to solve Scope 3 effectively. And there's really not many companies globally who I think are in a strong position to be able to do this with the trust and credibility with so many large and important companies. We are trusted to help facilitate that data across not just their upstream supply chain participants, but also their downstream customers. And so that's kind of where we're going, is not just let's deliver a nice application to support the accounting and reporting workflow, but how can we help the integrity of data all the way through the value chain? Now, on top of our commercial efforts, we also help to support and stand up a nonprofit through an effort we call the Carbon Call. And we stood up this nonprofit. We launched it back in February with participation from, I think, 15 to 20 big corporates and all of the big four accountancies with a threefold mission. Number one is let's encourage all companies to provide higher quality reporting and more reporting around carbon. Two is let's work with everyone, particularly those big accountancies, to standardize the accounting methodologies. And three, let's work together with all the various vendors and the big integrator implementation players in the space to ensure that the many applications popping up there between large companies and startups are all interoperable over time, so that data can move back and forth in and out of systems, because it does no good to anyone if all this data is locked away in a bunch of proprietary systems, proprietary data models, and proprietary non-harmonized methodologies.
So, Alex, I think we had made great progress in sustainability from a leadership standpoint around the world. Of it's more than just checking the box, right? We're seeing the real reasons why companies and leadership teams are moving, continue to move towards a sustainability framework. The things that we run into in today's world, where we have inflation, we have economic downturns, we have all of these reasons for leaders to maybe put this kind of on the back burner. What would be your call to action for senior leaders, the futures of their business, seeing some of the times that we're seeing right now?
That's a great question. At Microsoft, we know that our actions alone won't be enough to protect ecosystems, deliver the climate impact that we all need, achieve all the things across all dimensions of our planet that I think the scientific consensus is clear on. The world really does need a bit of a new partnership, new solutions, new policy that really have the potential to scale rapidly and scale globally. We as a company are focused on what are the new ways that we can use to harness the power of technology, with these partnerships and the right set of investments from the right companies to drive impact at scale and at a pace to help the world really more effectively deliver and transform, one, on all the climate goals that you know and think of, but also from a circular economy more broadly. And so, we're looking to play our role to catalyze collective action, transitioning to a more climate-friendly set of global, products, services, and operations. Also transition to a global circular economy that brings the ecosystem together of aligned partners, and really to put together transformational partnerships that can deliver research, guidance, implementation roadmaps that enable all these goals. We're looking to leverage the Microsoft Sustainability Manager application to help all of our customers out there support automated and comprehensive views of the Earth's impact across their operations and their value chains. And so that's an important tool for us that we're going to be really betting heavily on, and using that to work with our customers, not just on that application proper, but as sort of the building block for how we engage them across their enterprise, across the different parts of their operations and beyond their four walls, to help them bring technology and capabilities from all across Microsoft to accelerate their efforts across all those different slivers of their operations.
And I know you've had so many great use cases with your customer set, steel companies, energy companies, where you're driving, consumption out of their business from an energy or CO2 standpoint. And I think there's been so much work to be done on the reduce standpoint, but what are you seeing from a replace standpoint as far as your customers go? Is that starting yet? Is that something in the future? Where do you see kind of the next steps?
Yeah, I think we're early there still, but there's some success stories out there. We helped Rio Tinto a couple of years ago to solve all the really tricky underlying data challenges for them to launch a green aluminum product which is green by virtue of the fact that the power that goes into the smelting operation, the production facility, is all renewable, zero carbon energy, and that's one example of replace. We're starting to see a lot more examples cropping up. Not that many have started to achieve full commercial scale, but particularly on the back of CBAM in Europe, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, with Asian manufacturers, for instance, we're hearing a lot more I think, recognition and awareness that, wow, this CBAM thing is likely coming in 2026. And one, I'm going to have to attest to the carbon footprint of my products so that it can avoid maximum tariffs. And then next step is what I need to do to reduce those tariffs by reducing the footprint of my product, changing out, redesigning those products, using more renewables to power the operations that produce those products, going to my supply chain. So we really are starting to see, I think, a lot of action on that replace topic, with, I think, things like CBAM playing probably an outsized role in triggering companies to become more aware. And so that's what I'm really quite bullish on personally. And I think it's such a tricky data problem. And so, this problem, and really sustainability more broadly, is really, in a way, the ultimate data problem. And there's, in a way, there's no better company than Microsoft to help them solve some of those data issues.
So, Alex, in closing, are there any final thoughts or predictions about where we'll be, where Microsoft will be, where the world will be, from a sustainability in the next decade? And, what surprises do you see?
Yeah, I think it's a fast-moving space with so much innovation. So I'm just so excited about the amount of capital flowing into the space and the amount of awareness from companies. But one interesting area, the volume and variety of spatial data really does continue to grow exponentially. So whether it's coming from satellites with, we won't go into the details here, but a massive movement towards nanosatellites and all satellites of all form and function acquiring more data about the planet, as well as IoT continuing to penetrate, acquiring more data from ground sensors. The volume of data that's generating and the amount of compute required to manage and process all that data is really an interesting topic. It's certainly an interesting topic from the perspective of a cloud company like Microsoft. But I also think it's interesting from a planetary and a climate impact perspective. We really need more actuals, actual real-time or near real-time data. If we as a planet are going to properly understand where we are from a carbon emissions perspective, and then where each company is in their ownership and responsibility around that. And at the same time, from a commercial perspective, if companies aren't able to get to actuals rather than using emissions factors to be able to calculate their footprint, they're not going to be able to get credit for a lot of the good work that a lot of companies are doing, and then be able to push that credit through in the form of lower footprint products that, in many cases, they may be able to actually get capture market share, capture margin on the back of the lower footprint that those products represent. And so I think there's an imperative for all of us to get to actuals, more real-time data to support that, to attest to that and certify and track those products through value chains, so that companies are really going to be able to ultimately get to end consumers with products that are lower footprint that there'll be a premium for them in many cases. But to me, it's one of the most exciting things out here is this emergence of sort of sustainability differentiated products as a massive growth driver for companies. But all that takes data, lots of compute, and it really takes moving that data to to the infrastructure, I think, that is the cloud, if we're really going to fully capitalize on the promise of all that data, particularly the massive volumes of satellite data starting to flow.
Yeah, and I think only companies, large cloud hyperscalers like Microsoft have the ability to bring this all together. Alex, thank you so much for your time today, your insights on this topic, and it's just great seeing you again. Thanks for everything that you've done. And Joe, back to you.
Thanks, David. And thank you, Alex, for that look at sustainability in Microsoft. And thank you for watching the Vision by Protiviti interview. On behalf of David and Alex, I'm Joe Cornick. We'll see you next time.